Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. Live on the phone with me today, I have Martin Yate, who splits his time between New York and Georgia. Martin is an executive resume writer, a career coach, a job search strategist, and a New York Times best-selling author. Martin has written 17 career management books, including his most recent, Knock 'em Dead, The Ultimate Job Search Guide for 2016, which is in its 31st edition. Martin, thanks for joining me today.
Pleasure to be with you. You know, Angela, they say anyone can write a book. All you need is a lack of a social life. So I've written 17. What does that tell you?
Well, I'm really excited. I've seen quite a bit of your talks and, looked at your book, and I'm very excited to talk today. You have so much knowledge in this area. Well, you speak quite a bit about managing your own professional destiny and thinking of yourself as a company, which I think is really exciting. Can you talk a little bit about why this is important to us from a career growth perspective?
Yes, I think just about everyone working today, even the people who are just entering the workforce, you've been raised by the prior generations, and you've been raised by the standards of the prior generations. And you are probably still hanging on to a little bit of the story that all you need to do, son, all you need to do, daughter, is decide on a job, get an education, start at the bottom, dedicate yourself, work hard, make sacrifices, hang on with 10 fingers and 10 toes, and golly gosh, if you lose one, hang on with 9, because you will be rewarded with promotions and gradually increasing earnings, and at the end of the day, you'll retire with a gold watch, a house in the city, and a house at the lake with your yacht bobbing at the end of the dock. And Angela, as rocking horse droppings. It isn't true anymore. It was true up through the very early 1980s, but with the advent of the age of technology, a whole lot of jobs have been automated out of existence, and increasingly the rest are getting outsourced or exported to Mumbai, India, where someone will work for a whole day for less than we'll work for an hour. So we can't rely on this whole thing of find your passion and pursue it. We've got to be much more pragmatic. So I've looked at this and I said, well, what do you do? Who do you follow? What do you use as a model? You follow Donald Trump? Well, the Donald started with Daddy's Business and $38 million. So, he's a blowhard. Let's forget that. Who do we follow for surviving over a career? And putting this in context, we are all somewhere in what is a half-century career. We start working in our late teens. We're meant to retire about 65. Most people aren't anymore. That's 50 years. In that time, statistically, for the last 30 years, it's in the Bureau of Labor Statistics tell us we change jobs as a nation about every 4.2 years. And you talk to career people like you and me, and we tend to say people have somewhere between 3 and 8 totally separate careers. Job change is being an accountant at one company, moving to an accountant in another. Career change is changing from being an accountant to working at a whitewater rafting company as a salesman in the Adirondacks. And they're totally different propositions. So this is a very complex world. And if you look at this, that's somewhere between 12, 15 changes. And that means instead of being loyal and working hard and not building your networks, the most important life skills for you are not being a green belt, lean management, whatever it is, but it's how to write a resume, how to build a network, how to get a job interview, how to turn a job interview into a job offer, and how to get off on the right foot and make your job secure and get promotions, and so on. We have to start thinking of ourselves as Me Inc., a financial entity that must survive over the long haul, and where all decisions are made in the pragmatic best interests of Me Inc.
Yes, absolutely. I love the fact that you quote that everyone, is switching jobs on average, something like every 4.2 years. I've noticed that it seems to be an interesting generational issue where many of the folks that I talk with get negative pushback from their families as they try to make these career changes, which are much more normal. Are you kind of seeing that? Are you getting feedback from people along those lines that their parents or their grandparents just don't understand what they're doing?
Well, I think there's two issues here. When we're in our 20s, we're all 10 foot tall and bulletproof. I'm a lot older than that, and I'm still 9'9" and bulletproof. But the issues are this. Yeah, they're getting that pushback from older family members because that's not the way it used to be. But there is this fact. I said statistically we change about every 4.2 years. Sometimes it's our decision. Sometimes it's not. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the people who climb highest in the corporate world, they stay with companies longer because most of us make this mistake that we change jobs to get a promotion. I've been an accountant for 5 years. Now I want to be an accounting manager. I'm going to get a new job. So, listeners, you and I are going to hire a new accounting manager. We've got 2 accountants in front of us. One has been an accounting manager for 5 years. Then we've got this dweeb who'd like to have a shot. Who the hell are we going to hire?
Mm-hmm,
we're going to hire the one with the credentials, not the one with the potential. So, yeah, we want to stay with companies as long as it is viable and in our best interests, and no longer. I am not saying that we should change every 4.2 years. Mm-hmm. And yet things have changed. But you can't just blow off parents' advice or relations' advice who really care about you unless you've got a system in place.
Right.
And you know as well as I do, we're in the age of the internet where, people are giving advice about how to run your life. They're 23 years old and they're doing it in a 400-word blog. Mm-hmm. You can't answer the big questions of how to make a living and be successful and have a stable financial life and have a fulfilled life. You can't get those answers in 400 words. And you can't get it from a 25-year-old.
Oh, yes, I totally agree. Well, so recently on LinkedIn, you published a number of articles, but you published one called How to Make 2016 More Successful Than You Could Ever Imagine. And you actually addressed the fact that companies have less of a sense of loyalty than they did in the past to their employees. I'm wondering, can you kind of expound a little bit on that in terms of how does this impact our careers and, the career decisions that we choose to make?
Well, it's confusing because we go to work for a company and we go to work for this big multinational or a medium-sized company, 500 people. It's still a big company, right? And we're working for this man or this woman who's our boss, and we have a loyalty to this person. And we confuse loyalty to the guy or the girl who's our boss and our peers with loyalty to the company. Mm-hmm. We have, in this day and age, you hold that job, it's safe for just as long as it takes for the company to automate it out of existence or export it to Mumbai, India. That's as long as you're going to keep it. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it is. Jobs are being dumbed down to paper hats and name tags, and I'm not insulting those jobs. There is honor in all work. Or they're becoming infinitely more complex, or they're getting exported. And we have to be aware not only of staying current to make our job secure, but to keep a weather eye on the job market of what people are looking for. Whatever your job title is, you need to be looking at 6 or 12 jobs a year with your job title. Make sure you have the skills people are looking for. And if you don't, develop them. Because it will, A, make this job more secure, and B, if you want to look for a new one, it'll make that job more secure. Do I have time to give a little illustration of this?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
I had a resume writing and coaching business for many, many years. We were working with a guy last year, and he was a technology guy, IT guy, programming in C++. Said he thought it was going down. He'd spent the last year, he'd signed up for some courses at Learning Tree for another program, mm-hmm. and I forget for the life of me what it was, but he learned to code in this other language. We did his resume, we did the coaching with him, and he went out, and in 2 months he had 2 job offers. Mm-hmm. One with Dell to to program in C++, and one from a lesser-known company, but with more money, to program in the language that he thought was the future for more money. He'd never worked in it, but because he was employed, he had experience that showed he could pick up new skills, he had the credentials that said he could program in this language. That was an easy buy for the new company because he had kept himself current.
Absolutely. That's such a good example because when it comes to being a developer, you've learned a lot of different languages over the years, but in order to truly market yourself, you do need to be on top of the latest or at least be willing to kind of go there.
Yeah, you've got to keep current. I mean, all our jobs, whole industries have been decimated by the impact of technology and will continue to be. And as far as anyone can tell, the pace of change is going to continue to accelerate. So we have to think of our careers in totally different ways, and it's not just about this job and working for the man. I hope we'll have time in this conversation to talk about how we can pursue entrepreneurial and dream careers and how we go about doing that successfully. Because ultimately, for the people who listen to you, Angela, and who are close to the start of their career at the end, hanging out your own shingle, bringing money in your own front door is ultimately the only security any of us are going to have.
No, it's a really interesting topic. I'd love, we can go ahead and dive into it now if you're interested. I completely agree. And it's a scary place to go, but it is, it's where we're going in general. I mean, I see a lot more people that are doing contract work and that are kind of starting their own thing, sometimes by choice and sometimes, because they are unable to find a job.
Yeah. Let me put this in context. I developed this idea of multiple parallel careers about 20 years ago, and I first published about it in 1995. And I went on a national tour, and on every TV station in every one of 23 cities we visited, I was told that I was a communist and a socialist, and if I wasn't going to talk about being loyal to my employer, I could damn well go back where I came from.
Wow.
Right? Because what I was saying was this. Look, there are three ways you can make money in life. You can work for a corporation, and you get salary and benefits and a vacation. It's no longer secure. They don't want to keep you. They want to get rid of you as soon as they can find someone cheaper, automate it, or export it. Right? The second way you can make money is to be an entrepreneur. Now, most of us have entrepreneurial dreams, and we take our first shot at it in our teens and 20s. My first business went belly up when I was 16 years old. Right? And what tends to happen, we have a go when we're young, we don't know anything about business, and it fails. You can't believe People magazine. You're not going to be successful if you don't know how business works. It just doesn't work that way. So we try and we fail, and the grown-ups around us say, well, Carol, you've had a go. Now, why don't you grow up and get serious and get a real career like your dad? So we take our dreams and we fold them neatly and we put them under the bed. Right? Well, I had countless businesses before I got one off the ground at the age of 35, but for the last 31 years, I've been trucking along.
Right.
My business. Biggest chemical company in the world, Dow Chemical. Henry Dow went bankrupt 5 times. The difference between entrepreneurs who make it work is they keep going, they keep trying. It's often not the business you start in your teens and 20s. But this means that we pursue a core career. We pursue a core career and we do everything we can to get that job, make it secure, get promotions, make it successful. It is insecure, but it's still the safest route to middle-class success in this world. At the same time, we're going to pursue 2 other careers. Career number 2 is the entrepreneurial endeavor. Right? Now, studies on this say our needs change about every 10 years. So the jobs you go after in your teens and 20s, I had a rock and roll production company. I used to produce rock and roll shows in my teens and early 20s. A company called DeVille Productions. Went bankrupt, still have one of the posters on the wall. Right? And you keep on trying and you learn more at every instance until you become successful. But where do the lessons come from? They come from your day job. So you're not only doing that core career job for the paycheck. You're using it as on-the-job training for how a business survives. And I can hear half your audience saying, but I work for jerks. Well, yeah, maybe you work for jerks, but you know what? The paycheck's good on Friday. They can't be that big a jerk. They know something you don't. They know how to bring money in their front door. So this changes the way we treat the job, and it means, I used to be a headhunter, very sophisticated form of sales. We dealt with products that talked back. We sold people to people. Right. Very complicated. One of the problems salespeople have is they hate the accountants. You have to fill in sales reports. And I got chewed out because if my writing was any worse, I could have been a doctor. And my reports were, one, illegible, and two, they were sloppy. And I was told, why I had to treat the accountants with respect. And they said, do you realize that if it wasn't for the accounts payable people, we wouldn't be able to pay you on Friday? And I suddenly realized that the most boring job in the world was the most important one to me, being able to pay my rent. So in that day job, it's not only we learn what we do, but we want to make friends in other departments and learn how their jobs and their professions work, because this is going to give us the skills to open our own business. And, here's an illustration of this one. When I was writing a book years ago about this, ran into a woman, and she was actually an accounts payable clerk in New Jersey. And she'd had a grandfather who was a local jeweler and watchmaker. He had passed on some years ago, and she was the only one in the family who wanted his tools because she remembered sitting on his knee on Saturdays while he fixed watches and clocks.
Sure.
So she comes home one day, and she's got an old clock on the mantelpiece, and it's broken, and she's turned the TV on. She thinks, I'm going to fix that tonight. She goes and finds his tools in the closet and gets them out and puts the clock on the coffee table. She said, 1 o'clock in the morning, I realized I haven't been watching television. The clock working. I felt incredible.
Wow.
Next weekend, she was at a flea market buying a clock. 4 months later, she was at a flea market with a table with 15 clocks that she'd fixed.
Oh, my gosh.
I met her 4 years down the line. She was still an accounts payable clerk, but she drove an Audi A4, and she had a totally different social life, and she wasn't dependent on the corporation. She had a sustainable business that could take her through the rest of her days. And she said, I'm meeting completely different people. I'm more fulfilled. I have more money. I'm doing exactly what you're talking about. So that's the second parallel career. The third one is your dream career. We all have dreams of being the bass player in the rock and roll band. I'm sitting at my desk, and my Fender and my amp is right next to me, and I play between assignments. I'm the world's worst bass player. Right? But I've always got joy out of it. I wanted to be a pastor, because I thought that was an hour's work Sunday morning, hour's work Sunday night.
Oh, no.
And then when I realized it was a bit more, I gave that up. And then I thought of being a movie star. That was good. I'll go to Hollywood. I went to Hollywood 3 times. Couldn't get arrested.
Oh.
Ended up in Silicon Valley and became a headhunter.
Okay.
Meanwhile, I decided that being a writer would be good. I was going to write the next great American novel. I was going to write Catcher in the Rye #2.
Sure.
The sequel. So I spent 20 years doing that. Couldn't get arrested. But by this time, I was head of training for a division of a publicly traded international company, and I spent most of my time on planes and in hotels. And I wrote this book about, I know all about getting jobs and how to hire people. I write a job about hiring or about getting a job. I thought, more people want to get a job. So I wrote this book about how to get a job. And over 2 years, I wrote it 3 times. And then I sent it to every publisher in America who could possibly publish it. And it was turned down by 64 of the 65 who could publish that kind of book. And Knock 'em Dead, the Ultimate Job Search Guide, was first published in 1985 for what is now known as the smallest advance in modern publishing history. I got $100 and I had to rewrite it.
Oh, wow.
But 9 years and 50 weeks later, it hit the New York Times. It's now in its 31st edition and it's in 26 languages.
That's incredible.
So, bear with me a moment. I'm talking about core career, entrepreneurial career, and dream career. You pursue your dreams for the joy it gives you, the juice it puts in your life. And if you can turn that into a buck, it's an entrepreneurial career. And if it's super successful, it becomes your core career. So I wanted to be, let's kick out the pastor, because I was, we all need a little religion. I have less than most. But I wanted to be a movie actor, never succeeded. But I do 200 radio and television shows year in, year out for the last 30 years. It's a lot more than a lot of actors have been on TV.
Sure.
On stage. I've been on stage in front of thousands of people on 4 continents. Dream career, wanted to write a great American novel. I didn't do it. I will never write a novel. I hate writing.
Oh?
It's like ditch digging for me. It's my job. You do the same job for 30 years. You don't always love it that much.
Right.
It's a job. But didn't exactly come up with a handful of mud either. I made my living as a writer for most of my adult life.
Right.
And how did I do it? By treating my core career very seriously and using it as on-the-job training to discover how business works so that I could pursue my dreams and my entrepreneurial endeavors and give them, with every failure, greater and greater chances of success the next time.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great story, and it's a great illustration of how all of your experiences are building upon one another to sort of take you to that ultimate destination.
That's it, exactly. We build on our successes and we build on our failures too.
Well, so for our listeners who are, still working on those core careers and are still out there kind of interviewing for those corporate jobs, which may or may not be their ideal dream job, one of the things that, I've actually been asked by some of actually a very major publication in the U.S. was this question of, with regards to cover letters, about are cover letters obsolete? And I know that it's something that you have written about, and actually I think you used the words paper hat, just like you were describing before when you talked about it. Can you give us a little bit of your perspective on cover letters as it relates to kind of finding that corporate sort of a job, and are they obsolete or not?
On the one hand, yes, and on the other hand, no. And on the fence. Let me give you a more respectful answer. All recruitment has moved online, which means all job hunting has now moved online. This means that we are constantly uploading our resumes into resume databases. What many people don't realize is, I could give you a list of 20 of these job sites with their resume databases, each of which holds more than 200 million resumes. Your resume is a minnow in an Atlantic Ocean of minnows. So if your resume is going into a database, it's not going to anyone. If there is the option to add a cover letter, you have nothing to lose because you can use some more of the key words that relate to the job with which you have experience, of course. We can't tell lies in these things. And it can't hurt. It's not going to make or break the deal, but it certainly can't hurt. However, now, as I talk about in Knock 'em Dead, your goal in a job search every day should be to get in touch with the people who can hire you as quickly and as frequently as you possibly can. That means finding the shortest route between A and B. Now, if I want to get an interview with Angela Copeland, I can put my resume on Monster and hope she finds it. I can send my resume to her company, but it's going to go in a database again. So, number one, I'll try and send the resume to her company database. Number two, Angela Copeland Inc. has an email protocol. All companies have an email protocol. It's Angela Copeland, one word, at Angela.Copeland at A.Copeland at A_Copeland at. There's about half a dozen variations.
Yeah.
If you can find one person who works for that company, you've cracked the code of what that company's email protocol is. So if it's Angela.Copeland and you're the hiring manager, right, which I can identify with social networking, which we haven't talked about yet. There's many ways we can find the names of these people. I can send her an email with a cover letter and an attachment. Now a cover letter's working. Third thing I should do, and everyone tells me I'm crazy about this. We were working with a CFO at Microsoft last year. And I told him, look, John, what I want you to do, apart from all these other things, is send your resume by mail. He said, Martin, are you crazy? I work for Microsoft. Yeah. I said, no, it's really going to work, man. No one gets mail anymore.
Right.
You get him a resume, they're going to stop whatever you're doing. He said, well, everyone says you know what you're talking about, so I suppose I'll try it. It was on Thursday. Tuesday, he calls me at 11 o'clock. He said, I can't believe it. I sent out 5 resumes, priority mail, Thursday, and I had calls from 3 of them.
Wow.
Okay, in investing, they call this contrarian thinking. Mm-hmm. Doing things the rest of the herd haven't done. So, we've uploaded our resume. 2, and if there was a chance to use the cover letter, we've added it because we can't lose. 2, if we can find the name of the person, we can find their email address, we can send an email directly, we definitely must use a cover letter. Mm-hmm. Thirdly, if we send a resume by mail in a nice big flat envelope, they will stop doing whatever they're doing to read it because it's a chance to break away from that damn screen we've all learning to hate. Mm-hmm. Right? That must have a cover letter too. Mm-hmm. So that's 3 ways, and if you do this, then you do it the 4th way, quadruple your chances of an interview. You've written a cover letter that connects you to the company and the job and your resume, which will get your resume written more seriously. Now you pick up the phone and call Angela Copeland. Mm-hmm. If they start work at 9 o'clock, we call just before 9. If they lunch at 12, we call just after 12. They finish at 5, we call just after 5, because that's when Angela's most likely to be there and her people have already left. Mm-hmm. We don't leave messages, and you see, the question was about a cover letter, but as I tend to do,
no, this is fantastic.
And we can quadruple our chances of getting an interview. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it isn't an easy question. Resume isn't, a cover letter isn't what it used to be.
Right.
But if you have a program for career management and a carefully structured approach to job search, you can see that it clearly does. Another reason you should do it, any company you apply to, right?
Right.
If it doesn't say good communication skills on the job posting, send me an email with the posting, and I'll send you a free book. Right? Written communication skills are part of it.
Right.
You are creating, to go in the digital or the paper file, a paper trail that shows your written communication skills. Mm-hmm. So it continues to benefit in any number of ways. I don't think they're going to go away, especially the higher up you go.
Absolutely. Well, I absolutely love that technique, and I'm glad that you talked about all of those different ways to contact the hiring manager at the company. So often it seems that when you go to the trouble to do those things, even though they can be a little scary at first, you're typically the only candidate who went to that kind of trouble. And so I really do think you're right in that you get the attention of that hiring manager more quickly and more effectively than any other way.
Okay, can I add to that?
Sure.
Just one thought. We're all scared of this. Everyone's scared of this. Mm-hmm. But look at it this way. Walk over the other side of the desk. Pretend for a moment you are that hiring manager, right? And you've got to hire, and let's say we're all accountants because it begins with A and Martin's stupid, and remember that one, right? He needs an accountant. If he's short an accountant, it means he's doing extra work. He's not doing his job. And you know what he wants? When you're going for an interview, when your palms are sweaty, you know what the interviewer's doing over the other side of the door? She's falling down onto her knees, clasping her hands and looking up into the clouds and saying, please, Lord, let this be the one. Mm-hmm. I just want to hire someone who can do accounting and get back to my job.
Right.
Right? So think about that. So if you pick up the phone and call someone, they're going to take offense if they're looking for a job. No, they're going to be thankful that you've showed the initiative. Number 2, they know what it's like to look for a job. Mm-hmm. No one's rude about this anymore. And you know what? I was a technology headhunter in Silicon Valley, and I wasn't raised to talk on the telephone. I was raised to be a country gentleman. It's just that Dad didn't have the money for me to be a country gentleman. And I was terrified of picking up the phone and calling people. And my boss said, look, Martin, think of it this way. We're in San Mateo. You're calling San Jose. They don't know who you are. They're going to hang up. They're going to have forgotten about you in 30 seconds. You think they're going to hang up and come and find you and punch you in the nose? Mm-hmm. It ain't going to happen. They're either going to be pleased you called or the conversation is going to be over in 30 seconds. And I talk about, in the 2016 Ultimate Job Search Guide, there's a chapter called Reach Out and Touch Someone. And it's about how you make this verbal approach, how you structure the presentation professionally so that you can be in and out. Hi, this is who I am. This is why I'm calling. This is what I do. Have we got anything to talk about? And if you can make a pitch about your skills within that structure within 45 seconds, no one is going to take offense.
Not only are they not going to take offense, but many of the executives that you may be interacting with probably have a similar technique themselves, especially if they are ambitious type A people. They've probably been on the other side of the table trying to reach out to hiring managers and trying to network effectively. So I think, it's not something that's going to offend them. And if it does, maybe you don't want to work with them.
It shows initiative. There really isn't a manager anywhere in the world anymore, except maybe of internal auditing. Financial malfeasance, who are just very high analyticals. There isn't anyone that's going to say, hey, wait a minute, this is someone who's doing something different. I was in my office on the 1st of January, or whatever the Saturday was. I think it was the 1st of January. And I was the only person in the office, and I was fiddling around doing stuff. We'd been away for the holidays, and I was kind of cleaning my room. And the phone rang, 11 o'clock in the morning. I picked it up, and this guy says, hi, this is Max so-and-so. I'm calling you from a coffee shop in Miami. I'm reading one of your books, and I had a question. I thought I'd call you. I spent 30 minutes on the phone with him. I got off the phone and went in and told my wife, and she said, what on earth did you spend 30 minutes with him for? Did he buy something? And I said, no, it's January the 1st. It's a Saturday. 23-year-old kid just graduating, worked his way 40 hours a week through school, and he calls me for advice. I love this guy. That's who I want to speak to. He's different.
Right.
And he's a kid that's going to get ahead in life. And that's who we want to deal with. So picking up and calling someone, showing a little bit of initiative, isn't going to get you black marks from the best people. And it might just change the course of your career.
I totally agree. Well, you mentioned a couple of times, the resume database that you submit your resume to and sort of the online search process and how it's really different. I know that one of the things that you help your clients with is actually search engine optimization, or SEO. And I'd love if you could talk for a minute about, how SEO comes into play with our job search and why it's important.
It impacts in two ways. Number one, our resumes go into these huge databases, and they are searched for by specific search terms. Two, every professional worker in America should have a LinkedIn social media profile. You don't start with a LinkedIn social media profile. You start with a resume, because that's how you define who you are, what you're selling, what your brand is. Now, having written it, we recognize that the resume, first of all, has to be discovered. Recruiters don't look at it more than the first 30 results.
Right.
So you got it like a Google search. No one gets past the third page. Excuse me. So we need to deconstruct the job postings. You collect half a dozen, deconstruct them, and see how employers prioritize the needs for this job and the words they use to describe it. Then you write a resume that is based on the target job. Not all the things that you can do, but what you can do to satisfy these needs using these words. By the way, one of the very many books I've written is Knock 'em Dead Resumes. If you come to the knockemdead.com website, you can read it for free right on the site.
Oh, that's great.
And it will give you all the details of this, far more than Angela and I are going to be able to cover in our time together today. But if we use the keywords, and I recommend a resume should start off with contact information, a target job title, a performance summary, which captures your ability to do the 6 most important things for the job, and then it should have a professional skills section, which lists in 2 or 3 columns all the specific hard skills you have. Right, that acts as headlines. It's keywords near the top where it's recognized, and then you use those again in the context of the jobs where they were applied, because search engines are now contextual. They can recognize if a document is just being stuffed with keywords or if they are being used within the proper context. So we do that, and that helps out very briefly, very broadly, very simply, helps the resume perform better. When it comes to our LinkedIn profile, if we've done the resume right, it's very easy, just copy and paste it all in, and we can add some more detail. The big mistake when it comes to optimization, and I see this time and time again from people who connect with me, and by all means, reach out and connect with me. Send me a connect invitation. Love to meet you. And I guarantee if we have 50 people from your podcast send me connect invitation, I guarantee you 20 to 25 of them are going to have their name followed by the headline, "Looking for New Opportunity." Now, no one wakes up, no recruiter, no headhunter in the world ever wakes up and says, "It's a lovely day in the neighborhood, I'm going to read resumes today." Right? So they never go to a database and put in as a key search term, "need new opportunity." They put in aerospace engineer,
right,
VP
exactly.
of marketing. Right? So if you put in your headline, "need new opportunity 1," it makes you sound like a wuss. It makes you sound like a needy, hopeless, sniveling little wimp. Right? And 2, it's not going to get you found. So you're wasting all your time. It needs a job title. You know, there's no one listening today that's ever read a blog, a magazine article, bought a magazine, bought a book, watched a TV show, or watched a movie that didn't have a title related to the content. Correct?
Correct.
Is this right about you, Angela?
Oh, absolutely.
So if I actually stumble across your profile and the headline is "I need a job," am I going to read that and say, "Oh no, what a pain this guy is"? No, I'm going on to the next one. If he lacks the communication skills, that he doesn't know the most basic thing is put up a headline that's relevant to the content. Aerospace engineer, accountant. I'm not going to bother because he's clearly suffering from, what do they call it? Cranial rectal inversion.
Well, that's perfect. And I completely agree with the importance of it. And I like the fact that you highlighted how important it is to have a LinkedIn profile, because I do often receive questions about whether or not people, whether or not they should have a LinkedIn profile. And I think it's really critical.
Well, they have 300 million LinkedIn profiles now, and half of them are U.S. That's about at least 50% of our workforce. So, if you want any chance of connecting with half the American workforce, you've got to be on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, we call it a social media database, but you know what it is for recruiters? It's a resume database, so they search in exactly the same way. Right? There's 150 million resumes. You don't want to be there, where it's a honeypot to all the recruiters and all the headhunters. It's nuts. Of course you've got to be there. But you don't start by creating a social media profile. Yeah, there are people that will say, "You don't need a resume anymore. They're old-fashioned. You just need a social media profile, and I'll write you a social media profile for $100 or $500 or whatever it is." And you plunk down your hard-earned money, and the first question they ask you is what? "Please, will you send me your resume?"
Absolutely. Well, I think the other really important reason to have a presence on LinkedIn, for example, is, many people have the same name. I know in my case, about 300 people have the name Angela Copeland. And
damn them.
Right? And when you go to Google and you search for Angela Copeland, my LinkedIn profile is one of the very first things that comes up. And if it did not exist, one of the other 300 people would show up instead of me. And so you're there really to represent yourself. I once worked with a client who had a similar issue, who a career criminal had the same name as this client.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so when you would Google them, it would be mugshots.
Currently serving.
Right. Absolutely. Mugshots of the other person would come up.
That's bull.
So for examples like that, it's also really important to have your presence known so that people don't confuse you with someone else who may have the same name or a similar name. Well,
yeah, that's so important. Can I add to that with something that's relevant, especially to women? 50% of our marriages end in divorce, you're Mrs. Deborah Yate, and then suddenly you're back to being Mrs. Deborah Smith again.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got a resume out there as Deborah Yate, and you go through interviews, and they make you an offer, or they don't make you an offer because they checked your references, and everyone said that Deborah Yate didn't work there anymore because you were working at that company under the name of Deborah Smith.
Mm-hmm.
If you've been married and divorced, you have to make sure, at least when you give permission to check references, that they know if you are working under a different name.
Yes, I agree. I think this applies also to men. I've worked with a number of men who go by their middle name instead of their first name, and maybe their resume has their official name from their birth certificate using their first name, but at work they've gone by their middle name, and it's incredibly confusing for the employer. I mean, you would never want to lose an opportunity because the employer was confused about your name.
No, and people put on resumes, John T. Worthington III. You don't. If they know you, if everyone knows you as Tom, you put Tom Worthington. Less words, more white space, easier to read, less pompous. If your name, there's a lot of immigrants. I'm an immigrant myself. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of immigrants who have difficult to pronounce last names, and they anglicize their names. It's a smart thing to do. I have a client at the moment, last name Lopez, getting married this month in a week, and her name's going to be Whitehead, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's not Jocelyn Lopez anymore. It's going to be Jocelyn Whitehead. And she was sending her resume out, not getting responses, so she did a test. She sent out the same resume, 20 of them, Jocelyn Lopez, 20 of them, Jocelyn Whitehead. She got one response for the Lopez and 19 responses for the Whitehead, which is, one, disgraceful, but that's the world we live in.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're coming to this crazy country and you are an immigrant, like me, you recognize they got a funny way to run a railroad, but I better learn how it works. Mm-hmm. The more we can assimilate, the better we're going to do.
No, it's a good point. I mean, they have studies that show that that's a real issue that happens and it impacts people in their search. So I think that's a great point that you make. Well, as we go through the process, of course, eventually, hopefully, we end up landing that job interview. And I do have a couple of questions that I'd like to get your perspective on. In particular, the first one is, there's a very frustrating question that we're often asked in job interviews, and that is, what is your greatest weakness? And this question is incredibly difficult to answer, to give a good, honest answer, but not to give one that will sort of take away from your chances of getting that job. What do you suggest that we say when we're asked, what is your greatest weakness?
Don't think quietly and touch your chin and say, well, I guess it's because I work too hard. Because they'll think you're talking rubbish, right? They've heard it all before. This is what you do. You've got to be honest, and ideally you want to be honest in a way that isn't going to hurt you. That may sound like a tall order, but I don't do anything but write books about this crap. Mm-hmm. So there is an answer to it. And this, I believe, is the best answer. Seems to work for most people. You take an aspect of the job that nobody likes and everyone has to do and keep up with. And the perfect example of this is based on the age we work on. Mm-hmm. The technology you have to deal with at work, the software you have to deal with at work is changing every day. And it's a struggle to keep up with it. Mm-hmm. So you think about this and you think about, okay, what's a cutting-edge piece of software that I've just picked up or I can start picking up? And when they ask that question, you say, wow, that's a tough one. If I think about it, the way technology is changing our job in accounting, just keeping up with the software is almost a full-time job on itself. Can I give you an example?
Yes.
Angela, they've just brought out this new version of QuickBooks 24, and it's a really supercharged version of anything that's come before. Mm-hmm. Very confusing for most QuickBooks users because it's using the new Bambleweenie 5000 technology. Well, I guess that's my biggest weakness at the moment because I've just started a course a couple of weeks ago studying QuickBooks 26 with the Bambleweenie 5000 protocols. And it's a real job, but I am struggling and I am getting through it. And based on my past history of picking up new skills, I should be up to speed in about 8 weeks.
Okay.
And how can you object to that?
Mm-hmm.
Because you are saying, I have a problem keeping up with technology, which everyone in the world shares that need, shares that problem. You're saying, I have this problem, it's the same as you, unspoken, and this is what I'm doing about it, and here's an example of what I'm doing that shows, holy crap, Batman, she's on the cutting edge of our industry.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we do it without saying, my greatest weakness is that I'm on the cutting edge of the industry. we tell the truth and come up smelling like roses.
Mm-hmm. I love that. It's such a good answer. Well, another difficult situation that can come up in interviews is illegal questions. And I'll tell you, I think it was the very last interview I had for a large company that I won't name. The hiring manager asked me, how old are you? Are you married? Do you have any children? And do you plan to have any children? The one person asked me all those questions back to back. So
astounding, disgusting, but
right,
astounding.
Right. So anyway, I'd love your perspective on how to handle these kinds of questions as they arise.
Well, you have every right in the world to say, that's an illegal question. Mm-hmm. You're breaking the law. I'm not going to answer that. You think you're going to get a job offer?
Exactly.
Now, let's pull back for a moment. This guy sounds like a jerk, but if you were at a barbecue and you met someone new, what are the first questions you'd ask?
Mm-hmm.
How long have you been in the neighborhood? Are you married? Do you have kids? How old are you? Mm-hmm. Wow, you don't look that old. They're exactly the questions people ask us when they like everything else they've heard.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they slip out. Now, the worst of these illegal questions are the ones that aren't asked, and these are for the people in their late 40s and 50s when age and wage discrimination kicks in. Mm-hmm. Can I make a comment on this?
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so we go to these things, and you must get lots of plaintive cries for help about this, just as I do. You know, I'm going to interviews and I can do the job, but I know I'm being discriminated against because of my age. What do? Well, you can say nothing and cross your fingers and hope that they don't notice that you look 15 or 20 years older than everyone else in the building.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that, but it ain't going to do you a damn bit of good. Right? Mm-hmm. I believe in taking the bull by the horns. And if there isn't a chance to bring it up earlier, let's imagine you were interviewing me, and it was coming towards the end of the interview, and we know it's the end of the interview when Miss Copeland says, do you have any questions? To which I would say, well, Angela, I know that if I was sitting in your position, I'd have a whole bunch of questions that I want to know that I couldn't ask you. You know, I want to know how old you were. I want to know if you had heart problems. You know, there's all kinds of things I want to know about you. So let me tell you, this is how old I am. This is how long I've been in the business, and I've been doing this job for this many years. And I see that I'd probably be the oldest person in this department by at least 15 years. And there might be one or two benefits for that, if you'll just give me a moment. First of all, it's been proved statistically that the younger people are, the more quickly they move jobs. That means most of these people behind you are going to be ready to move in 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. I'm older. I'm not looking to jump jobs. I'm looking for a place to make my home. I love what I do. These other people you have in the department, if you don't have customers who are older than 35, don't hire me. But if you have customers of both sexes and all races and all ages, maybe someone with my experience would help us understand it better. Mm-hmm. You have a department, seems like it's well run. The poop still hits the paddle wheel. Crap's still going to happen. Don't use that word in an interview. I've been through panics before. I don't get rattled. When all your children are running around in circles like chickens with their heads cut off, I'll be calm. I'll bring them together. Mm-hmm. Also, because I'm not after your job, I won't be standing at your back with a knife. I'll be standing at your back protecting you. And after 6 months, you realize I'm someone you can trust to be a good right hand. Mm-hmm. And finally, I made a lot of my mistakes on someone else's payroll. Mm. Now, I got about twice as many arguments for why you should hire the older person, and I got just as many arguments for the younger people of why you should hire me, not someone more senior. Mm-hmm. Right, but again, you know, it's how we approach this, and that's what we do in the second part of the Ultimate Job Search Guide. It's how we turn interviews into offers. And it's how we position ourselves. It's like if you got fired.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone feels terrible when they've been fired, and there's a lot of things you have to do. But the first thing you've really got to do, honestly, is you've got to get out of the blue funk it's put you in and start recalling how you got the damn job in the first place, because that's the headset you need to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Then there's some other more challenging things to do to clean up the mess, but we have to look at job interviewing as something totally different. It's not just be yourself, which is what they tell you in career services. That's rubbish. Do you know, I don't know if you know this or know this from my work, Angela, I believe that every one of us, we're all professional schizophrenics. Can I explain?
Oh, go for it.
All right. We're all different at work. We grow up and everything's taken care of by mom and dad and brothers and sisters or, whatever it is. And then we move into the adult world and suddenly we are on our own. We get our first job and we're there the first day and we're there on turn. After an hour and a half, no one's spoken to us and we're desperate for the bathroom and the coffee machine, and we go off and we find the bathroom, and then we find the coffee machine, and on the wall behind the coffee machine is this yellow sheet of yellow legal paper, and in Sharpie someone's written on it in big letters, "Your mother doesn't work here, pick up after yourself." And we go, ooh, I've got to learn to behave differently. And we develop a whole new set of behaviors that we use in our professional lives and not so much at home.
Mm-hmm.
I took one of these tests for salespeople for a company who wanted to know what I thought. I took the same test twice. First test, I answered it honestly because I was told there's no right or wrong answers, just answer the questions. One question was something like, how do you like to spend your Friday evenings? Reading a book, going to a party, da-da-da-da-da. And I thought, oh my God, I'm a headhunter. I'm in sales. I don't want to talk to anyone. I've been talking to bloody people all week. I want to just have a bath and read a book. Mm-hmm. So I answered honestly like that. Came back with a strong recommendation for caution. I took the same test 45 minutes later. This time I said, I'm a professional schizophrenic. I'm a headhunter and salesperson by day. Let me put my headhunter hat on. Mm-hmm. Took the same test, came to the same question, said, what do I want to do Friday night? I really like to relax, but if I go to the party, I might find the client or the candidate that will put me over quota this month. I'm going to go to the party. 45 minutes later, came back, same tests for the same guy, comes back with a strong recommendation to hire.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have to learn ways to hire, and I talk about these. We call them, in Knock and Dead, we call them transferable skills. Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of blogs written about this, and they will say, these words don't mean anything. When they ask for someone with multitasking, creativity, time management skills, communication skills, teamwork and leadership, it doesn't mean anything. You could put this on any job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the point is, boys and girls, he said, sounding like Bill Nighy, for those of you who are hip enough to know who Bill Nighy is. The point is, boys and girls, that these skills apply to every job on the planet. Mm-hmm. They are what empower you to do that job well. So, yes, they do apply to every job.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, do I have good time management, organizational, multitasking skills? It's, how do I use my multitasking, time management, organizational skills to keep track of all the accounts payable coming in the door?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we show that we have the transferable skills in an interview. We show how we use them to do our job in answering the interviewer's questions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you mentioned earlier turning interviews into job offers. And the last thing I just really wanted to touch on is, in terms of interviewing, one of the first questions we're often asked is, how much money do you want to make, or how much money do you make today? And it can be a tricky question because, especially if you're looking to make more money, or maybe you make a little too much, you don't want to exclude yourself early on in the process. What do you recommend that, what should we say when we're asked that question? How much money do you want?
Okay, now you actually asked me two different questions there.
Sure.
At the beginning of the interview, how much you're making and how much do you want, or how much money do you want, which more likely comes at the end of the interview. Which would you like me to handle?
Well, I've actually heard both at the beginning.
Yeah, they have, yeah. At the beginning, how much, if they ask you specifically how much you're earning, you've got to tell the truth. If they ask you how much you want, you said, well, I don't really know anything about the job. Do you think we could talk about the job and see if I'm even qualified for it yet?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when they ask you towards the end of the process, and you don't bring up money, no point bringing up money till they do, till they want you. When they bring up money, if you give a figure that's too low, you'll kick yourself for the next 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Selling too cheap. If you ask too much, you don't get the job offer, you'll kick yourself for the next 3 years for asking too much. This is what you do. Before you go in, I explain this in the negotiation chapter of the Ultimate Job Search Guide, you come up with 3 numbers for yourself. Figure number 1, what's the least I've got to have to put food on my table and to keep a roof over my head? Figure number 2, what's a fair offer given my experience in geography? Figure number 3, what's the offer that's going to make me drop dead and go to heaven on the spot? Mm-hmm. Having come up with those 3 figures, you kick out the bottom one, and now you've got a salary range from your midpoint to your high point. That job has a salary range. So when they ask you how much you want, you say, well, assuming I can do the job and based on A, B, C, D, and E and your needs, I believe I can, I'd naturally like to make as much as my experience will allow, but I'm hoping to find something between midpoint to high point. And by using a range, you're not nailing yourself down to a specific figure, and you've got the negotiation off to a good start.
Well, I love that. Well, we've covered so many different topics today, and you've given us just some excellent advice. Are there any other thoughts that you'd like to leave us with today?
I'd like to offer something. I really enjoyed talking to you today, Angela, and we haven't done this before.
Okay.
And, as a guest, you can only ever be as good as the host. And I don't often talk to people who are as well informed as you. So I'm going to do something for your listeners. I hope you'll go out and buy Knock 'em Dead 2016, The Ultimate Job Search Guide. It's generally regarded as the gold standard of job search in the world. It's in 26 languages. If you do this, and if you're a listener of Angela's podcast, I'll do this for you. You buy it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and you like it, and you go and give it an honest review. If you hate it, say you hate it. I don't think you will. And then you go to the Knock 'em Dead site and send me an email saying, hey, here's my proof of purchase, and here's the review I wrote. Send me your resume, and I will review your resume for you, or I will refund you the money you spent on buying the book.
Well, I appreciate that. That's really exciting.
That's how much I believe in it. This is what I've been doing all my life. Mm-hmm. And I didn't come here. I'm an immigrant. There was no one to tell me, as you were talking about people, about parents and friends telling them. I didn't know anyone. I came with a suitcase and a bottle of Jack Daniels, which I broke in the airport, and someone's cat. Mm-hmm. Right? So everything I learned about how business works here was based on reality of not knowing anything and having to work it out. Mm-hmm. And this is what I've been doing for 37 years. And the Knock 'em Dead philosophy works. It's proven. I update it every year because I don't have a life apart from doing this. It's been great being with you, Angela.
Well, thank you. And also, what is your website for Knock 'em Dead?
knockemdead.com.
Great.
KNOCKEM, then dead, as in Grateful Dead. And it's been around since before the internet, or they've given it a different name.
Excellent. Well, Martin, thank you for joining me today. This has been very helpful.
Hey, it's been a hoot. Thank you, Angela. Take care. God bless everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Tune in next week for another edition of the Copeland Coaching Podcast. And if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher to ensure you never miss an episode.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.